Let's talk about Jack Smith. He is in talks with the Justice Department about winding down his criminal prosecutions against Donald Trump. In your letter, you warned him that his office, quote, is not immune from transparency or above accountability for its actions. What did you mean by that?
Well, there's a long history in the Congress with our oversight responsibility, our constitutional duty to do oversight, of looking at the special counsel. I mean, when Chairman Nadler chaired the Judiciary Committee, he wanted this information from Robert Mueller. He got the information. Mueller came and testified. Of course, we've had Mr. Durham, Mr. Hur. We're looking at Mr. Weiss.
So you could open a formal investigation into
No,
Jack
all
Smith?
we said is we want you to preserve the documents. We want to see what's going on. And we know from testimony that one of his lawyers, Jay Bratt, threatened what appeared to be a threat. We have the communications. We have some testimony where Jay Bratt said to someone who was representing one of the defendants in these cases that, oh, I thought you were interested in being a federal judge. People may not look kindly on that if you're helping someone who's part of the Trump administration, Mr. Walton Atta. So there's facts there, and we want all the information, preserve the records, let us have it. This is consistent with how Congress has always operated.
But it's also sometimes a precursor to an investigation.
Well, look,
are you ruling it out?
What I'm saying is, I mean, if you think about, people talk about retribution. The retribution has been from the other side. I've been trying to stop retribution for the last 4 years.
I'm going to get to that in 1 second.
I just for the last 10 years. You can go clear back to when the Obama administration targeted.
I'm going to get to that in 1 second, I promise. But I just want to.
We're for stopping that, but we do want the facts, and that's why we sent the letter. Mr. Loudermilk and myself sent the letter saying, "Hey, Mr. Smith, preserve this information." We want the same thing from David Weiss, for goodness sake. Because we know what he tried to do. He tried to get the sweetheart deal in the Hunter Biden investigation, and we had some brave whistleblowers come forward. We want the information. We think the American people are entitled to the information.
Will Jack Smith be called to testify?
We'll have to see. Well, I assume there's going to be some report, but all we're saying is preserve everything so we, the Congress, who have a constitutional duty to do oversight, can see everything that's going on. And we have the facts regarding Jay Bratt, one of your lawyers, which they have not been willing to give us information on.
Do
that.
you think it would be beneficial for him to testify, or could that actually?
It may be. That's been the norm. But we're not taking anything off the table. We're not saying for sure, but we want the information.
Okay, so let's go back to what you just brought up, which is the question about retribution. You also lead the weaponization of the federal government subcommittee. Trump has repeatedly threatened to prosecute Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Liz Cheney, Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, General Mark Milley, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, New York AG Letitia James, and that's just some of the people he has talked about. Do you support him using the Justice Department to go after the people who disagree?
He didn't do it his first term. What I support is stopping.
Right, but this is a second term.
What I support is stopping this lawfare, stopping this political targeting, political cases. We all know the Fonnie Willis case, the Alvin Bragg case, and the Jack Smith cases were all driven by politics. The American people understood it. That's why they had this overwhelming win. One of the reasons this overwhelming win for President Trump. So I'm against the retribution. I'm against the Justice Department saying if you're a mom and dad showing up at a school board meeting, we're going to investigate you. I'm against the FBI putting together a memorandum at the Richmond field office which said if you're a pro-life Catholic, you're an extremist.
So I just want to...
We want all that to stop.
I just want to put a button on this. So what you are saying is that all of the times that President Trump said so many things about people that he promised that he would go after them and prosecute them, you were going to encourage him not to do that?
Well, all I know is what he didn't do.
I know, but we're talking about
lock her up. He's talking about his opponent in 2016, Secretary Clinton, talked about lock her up. He didn't do that. He didn't go. But the Democrats went after him.
I know, but I'm talking about
Donald
Trump's second term.
I mean,
going forward.
Since then,
he has said many times.
I don't think any of that's going to happen because we're the party who's against political prosecution. We're the party who's against going after your opponents using lawfare. In fact, I think this is one of the issues that the
So it was just a campaign rhetoric? It wasn't real?
Well, I think he's pointing out what's going on. The retribution, actually, Liz Cheney on January 6th went after President Trump, said things that weren't accurate, I think, in their report. The other individuals he's talked about have been part of this retribution going after President Trump. Never forget, it started clear back before he was in office. They spied on his campaign in 2016.
But I am not talking about...
for 8 years, they've been going after President Trump.
He won.
He sure did. He won big.
He won big. So my question, and what people want to know, is what he is going to do looking
I think
forward.
He's going to do.
Just for example, 2 days ago, he called for investigations into anyone spreading rumors.
I think he's going to secure the border. I think he's going to get rid of this crazy inflation that's hurting middle class and working class families, hurting our economy. I think he's going to get back to common sense energy policy. I think he's going to focus on protecting the First Amendment. I mean, think about this. Did you ever think you would see Donald Trump, Elon Musk, RFK Jr., and Tulsi Gabbard on the same team? They were on the same team because of the attack on free speech, the attack on the First Amendment. He's going to focus on those things that the American people elected him to do.
Okay. I mean, there are a lot of, I want to move on to immigration. There are a lot of things that you just said that I think aren't totally fact-based. So they say that they're for free speech, but there are a lot of things that we know are not happening. I want to ask about immigration.
Came together.
Well,
all
maybe.
Because of the attacks on the First Amendment, on free. This is something our committee spent a bunch of time. We understand that there was censorship. We pointed that out.
Let's turn to immigration. Top Trump advisor Stephen Miller says that mass deportations of undocumented immigrants will begin as soon as Donald Trump takes office. I want to play this out for the American people so that they understand what exactly is going to happen. First of all, he takes office. Who's targeted first?
Well, he's already said that. People have migrants here who committed crimes, criminal.
How are you going to find them?
The ones who committed crimes, you go after them. We've had.
But I mean,
Ms.
like who actually?
Whose daughter was killed. We've had Rachel Morin's family who came in and talked.
How are they going to be found? Or is it going to be the military? Is it going to be local law enforcement?
1.3 million migrants have already had their asylum case adjudicated, been in front of a judge, and the judge says, you do not qualify under the law. We're the party of the rule of law. Those 1.3 million, they don't qualify under the law.
My question is how you get them.
They're supposed to be removed. They have a removal order. You start there. You start with the criminals. You start with the people who've already been.
I want to understand. So people say, like, let's say one of these people is living in their apartment complex. Is the military going to come in? Is it the local law enforcement? How is it actually physically going to work?
The Trump administration, the Department of Homeland Security will work with local law enforcement, and we'll focus on the people who 1.3 million already been in front of a judge and said, no, you're not entitled to stay here. You have to be removed. There's an order there, a court of law. They've had their due process. They've had the whole process played out.
So let's move on beyond that population, non-criminals, people who are in the country who are not legal citizens, those who have not committed crimes.
We're starting with the criminal element.
I know, but after that.
1.3. Well, we'll start there and then go from that point. But again, this was clear in the election. This was one of the top issues. President Trump had the greatest political comeback in history, won 30 states, won all 7 swing states, won the popular vote, won an electoral college landslide. This was one of the big issues. He's told the American people he's going to do it.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm asking how it's going to work.
This is how I believe it'll start. And remember, they told him in his first term, he couldn't do certain things. He got them done. I'm convinced he'll get it done, but I also am convinced he's going to start with the criminal element and the 1.3 million who've already been in front of a judge, and the judge says you have to be removed.
Ultimately, will it be 15 to 20 million as he promised on the campaign trail?
Well, we will see. What I know is if you send that message, I think that is so good for securing our border, which the country wants. Just the opposite of what the Biden administration did. Biden and Harris administration came in on day one and said, no more building the wall, no more remain in Mexico, and when you get here, you will not be detained, you will be released, and 10 million came in. So the country rightly said, let's put a stop to that, and the place to begin is with the criminal element and the 1.3 million who've already been adjudicated.
So the last question I want to ask about this are the Dreamers. There are an estimated 3.6 million people who were brought into this country illegally by their parents. They were too young to know the difference. Many of them know no other home but the United States. Do you believe that ultimately they too should be removed?
Again, President Trump's going to start where I said. If you're talking about kids, you're talking about young people, the real question is the 200 and some thousand that the Biden-Harris administration allowed in and don't know where these kids are.
My question is about the Dreamers.
That's the real question. No. The American people spoke clearly.
Congressman, that's a separate issue. I'm asking about the Dreamers because there are a lot of people who know no other home but the United States. Should they ultimately be taken across the border?
The country wants the law enforced. We'll start with where we started, and then that question will be addressed later on, I believe. But right now we need to start with the criminal element and the 1.3 million.
Okay, let's talk about the election because in the run-up to the election, even on election night itself, Donald Trump baselessly accused Democrats of cheating. As soon as the results started to come in and showed them going his way, he stopped. Silence. Nothing about that. I haven't seen you or your colleagues claiming any election irregularities, no rampant voting fraud this time. It seems to me that Republicans claim voting fraud and election integrity when you lose and not when you win.
No, I mean, again, as I said before, this election, I think, was the greatest political comeback we've ever seen. I mean, he did something that even Teddy Roosevelt couldn't do, for goodness sake. And the country...
But you think it was a free and fair election?
No, this election, you just interviewed the Latino, I think, restaurant owner or a restaurant worker, and he said he was tired of all the woke stuff. This election was real simple. You had back-to-back administrations. We got something we very seldom get in American history, American politics. Back-to-back administrations now running for the top job, and people could do a direct comparison. And they said, we like what we had under President Trump versus...
But last time around...
We like the safe streets versus the record crime.
Last time around, your leader claimed that there were problems with fraud. We like the secure border versus the open border. Right, those are policies.
That's what this election was about.
That's totally fair. But last time around, it wasn't so much about the policy differences or the personality differences. There were false claims about election fraud when Donald Trump lost. This time, Donald Trump won, and you think the election was free and fair. Do you see there's a little bit of a...
No, I think the Democrats got to ask, why did we go from getting 81 million to getting 70 million? What happened to those 10 million people? Maybe they needed... Maybe it's not smart to run an election where you have no vision, no record to run on, and you're just going to call the other side names?
Do you believe that the 2024 election was free and fair?
I do.
And why was it different from 2020 when he lost? Is that the only difference?
No, there were concerns about 2020 with all the mail-in voting that happened. You know, Pennsylvania had like 2-point-something million mail-in ballots come in without any signature verification, which was required under Pennsylvania statute. So there were all kinds of concerns with how the 2020 election was carried out. But
there was absolutely
the biggest question Democrats need to be asking, what happened to the 10 million voters that Joe Biden got that didn't come out for Kamala Harris? A bunch of them, President Trump's numbers were right up where they were in 2020, but the Democrats were much lower. I think it's because they had no vision, no record to run on, and they just wanted to call everyone names. Turns out when you tell people, oh, you're fascist, racist, deplorable garbage, they don't like that. And then when you use lawfare to go after their candidate, they don't like that either. Well, that's why they came out. So on top of the economy, on top of the price of gas, on top of the inflation, that's why they voted for President Trump.
We're out of time. I just want to say, for the record, that there was no evidence of widespread fraud in 2020. It went through many, many different court cases. And I do think the name calling,
that's what I was concerned about.
The name calling was very strong on the Republican side of the aisle from the former president, and you know that. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you going through all of this.
You bet.